Welcome to another exciting episode of Mr. Takeda Teaches Algebra. This is the Math 8 edition, and I'm your host, Mr. Takeda. And I'm going to teach you some math right now. This is lesson 1.2 on solving multi-step equations. When we solve multi-step equations, we want to use inverse operations to isolate the variable. In other words, we're going to undo the math that's kind of shown in front of us. We have to think backwards. What do we mean by inverse operations? Like I said, they're operations that undo each other. So addition is undone by subtraction, and multiplication is undone by division. All right, so keep those in mind as we get started here. This first example says the height in feet of a tree after x years is 1.5 times x plus 15. After how many years is the tree 24 feet tall? Well, this whole expression here is representing height, but this is also representing the height. So I can write those together as an equation. So the thing that makes this an equation now is it has an equal sign in it. This is the height that we're asking about, and this is the expression that represents the height compared to the age of the tree. Okay, so let's go ahead and start to undo these things now. You'll notice that I have a multiplication and I have addition. Well, the inverse operation to addition is subtraction. So I'm going to subtract 15 from both sides as my first step. And 15 minus 15 results in a 0, so I'm just going to ignore that because when we're adding 0, it doesn't really change anything. On the right side, 24 minus 15 is 9. So 9 equals 1.5 times x. And then dividing both sides by 1.5. Now this is something that you could do on a calculator, and I've brought up a calculator here to use. I want to do 9 divided by 1.5, and that equals 6. So this is 6 equals x. 1.5 divided by 1.5, the reason we want to divide by 1.5 is because anything divided by itself equals 1. So 1 times x is just x, so the answer to this is 6 years. Now I wanted to take just a moment here and demonstrate something else to you. I could have written this as 9 equals 3 halves x. Right? 1.5 is the same as 3 halves. And the way I get rid of this fraction, I'm going to divide by 3 halves, but that's the same thing as multiplying by 2/3, multiplying by the inverse. In other words, the fraction is flipped over. And the same thing over here. And the reason we do this, of course, is 3 times 2 is 6, and 2 times 3 is 6, so 6 over 6 is just 1, so this is 1x on that side. On the right side, that's just 1x. Over here, though, which makes this nice to do this math without a calculator, is when we multiply a whole number by a fraction, it really means multiply the numerator but divide the denominator. But I can do it in any order. And hopefully, and that doesn't always work, dividing by the denominator first will result in a smaller number. 9 divided by 3, well, that's 3. Okay, that's easy. Now 3 times 2 is 6. So again, 6 years here. Okay, so that's just a little, hopefully, refresher for dealing with multiplying by the inverse with fractions. Okay, the next thing we want to look at is combining like terms to solve an equation. What do we mean by like terms? Like terms are things that can be simplified together, and that can only happen when they share the same variable factor as part of that term. So 8x and 6x are like terms because they have the same variable and also with the same exponent. In this case, that exponent is that invisible one we see here. We don't see here, I should say. 8x minus 6x, I can simplify that down to 2x. I'll bring everything else down. It's minus 25 equals negative 35. Okay, so now I'm back to that two-step equation like we did in example 1. I've got multiplication and I have a subtraction. So I'm going to go in reverse order. I'm going to add 25 to both sides. Negative 25 plus 25 is just 0, so that leaves the left side of 2x. The right side, negative 35 plus 25 is negative 10. And then dividing both sides by this 2, dividing both sides by 2, I get left with x equals negative 5. Okay, so there's example 2. For our last example, there might be some other types of simplification that we have to accomplish before we can combine like terms. So let's take a look here. I've got distribution. Distributive property should be applied first because I've got this expression in parentheses. So if you remember distributive property, that means I'm going to multiply that outside factor by everything in the inside factor. So 2 times 1 is 2, and then that minus sign comes down. 2 times 5x is 10x, and then plus 4, and then equals negative 8. Well, previously I said like terms are terms that have the same variable factor in it, but in this case it's the 2 and the 4 that are like terms. They're constants. They don't have a variable part to it, and that's okay because all constants are considered like terms. So 2 plus 4 is 6, so I'm going to say negative 10x plus 6 equals negative 8. So now we're back to that two-step equation that we had previously, multiplication and addition. So I'm going to subtract the 6 first. I'm sorry, 6 first. I'm going to subtract 6 first. 6 minus 6 is just 0. So negative 10x equals negative 14. And now dividing both sides by negative 10. X equals, okay, let's simplify this. A negative divided by a negative is going to be a positive. 14 and 10 are both even numbers, which means they can both be divided by 2. 14 divided by 2 is 7. 10 divided by 2 is 5. And this is 7/2, or if you're so inclined, 1 2/5, so 1.4, something like that. I like the fractions, it makes it easier. Okay, that's it. Make sure you have these notes for the next time we're in class together. Thanks a lot, and have a great rest of your day.